Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Oscar prediction update. Now, I am aware that it's taken a long time. Usually when I do my Oscar prediction videos, I try to do them early in the month. But last month was tricky because it was Barbenheimer month, and I wanted to wait until I had seen both movies. Uh, and then, in the lead up to doing it this month, on top of being very busy, busier than usual, I also had a problem in that every time I tried to start updating my predictions, I would think to myself, there's not a whole lot to say, is there? I don't know if that much has really changed since the last time I did it. But within the last few days, we did get a change, a pretty major change that turns everything upside down. Dune Part II has been delayed to 2024. Now, this has pretty serious implications, and we're going to get into that as well as some of the other. I think one of the first things that has to be addressed is if Dune Part 2 is going to move, then what else is going to move? And then you almost start to get into 2020 territory of like, we don't know what movies are coming out and what movies are getting delayed. Now, this isn't quite as bad as that because we know there are already enough big movies that have come out that are going to be contenders in this year's race, but there is still a lot of uncertainty. So I've approached this year's predictions, I've approached this month's predictions basically under the assumption that nothing else is going to move, and I know that assumption is probably wrong. I think Wonka could move. I think Color Purple could move. We're not sure, and so I don't think Killers of the Flower Moon is moving, but other stuff could move. It's really careful. I don't want to try to guess what will or will not move. Instead, I'll say let's just jump right into it, but and for the first couple of categories, there's not a whole lot to say. Documentary feature is basically the exact same as last time. I have added Everybody, which I hear very good things about, but I worry it might be a bit too populist for the documentary branch. And then, I don't know if I mentioned this, I did see The Deepest Breath. It's solid. I think it's getting nominated. I don't think it's winning. Uh, Best international feature, though, so at this point, we are starting to find out more about what films each country is submitting. And so El Conde, which I had in there up until today, I found out, oh, they're not submitting it. And so I replaced it with About Dry Grasses. I hear interesting things about a lot of these movies, but again, I talked about most of this last time. And we'll talk more later about Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall, but I do think it's going to be interesting to see which one of those two movies comes out on top. Animated feature, again, there's not a whole lot to say. I switched Boy and the Heron and Nimona, but the rest of the category feels the same. It is interesting because I feel like there's a very tight top 7, and Spider-Man, Boy and the Heron, and Nimona are all on. And then the last 4 slots are between the last 2 slots are in between 4 movies. I'm tired. We got Wish and Chicken Run, neither of which have been seen, and then Mutant Mayhem and Elemental, which have been seen. And Elemental, I think, I was sort of dismissing that, but it's gotten surprisingly strong legs at the box office, which makes me think it could maybe be more of a contender. Honestly, I think whether or not Elemental gets on is entirely dependent on the kind of reviews that Wish gets. Because if Wish is a success, then I think Disney's going to forget about Elemental. But if Wish is a disappointment, then they're going to be like, hey, remember Elemental? Let's bring that into the race. I feel like Disney is getting on for one of their movies. And then Mutant Mayhem is good. I can certainly see it getting on, but they don't always go for movies based on pre-existing IPs. And Chicken Run is different because it's Aardman, and Aardman is so beloved. Yeah, I'm sticking with Wish and Chicken Run for now, but I I think it's a very tight top 7. Now, getting into best sound, this is where you start to see the effect of Dune not being here anymore. And initially, I said last month that this category was going to be a tight race between Dune and Oppenheimer. Well, now it looks like a pretty solid victory for Oppenheimer. Uh, and the rest of the nominees, I don't know what else to say. I have added both Gran Turismo and Ferrari in the 6 through 10 category. I don't actually know how well those are going to do, but I do think Gran Turismo is shaping up to be a potentially solid hit that might potentially do well at the box office, and that might translate ish. Keep that in mind because I'm going to bring it up again later. Best original song. Now, as I said last time, I really think Barbie is going to be the first film since La La Land to get on in for two of its songs. However, I now think that What Was I Made For is going to win. That song was my big takeaway after seeing the movie, and it seems like it's really become the song of the year, potentially. I'm Just Ken is also very well liked, and I think is getting the nomination, but I think people want to see that song nominated so they can see it performed. In terms of what's actually going to win, What Was I Made For, I think it just is resonating with a lot of people, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. And I know that Billie Eilish just won, but they don't always care about repeat viewings about repeat wins in the below the line categories. And I think Billie Eilish is a big star. I think the rest of the top five is the same. And I don't really think there's a whole lot to add below that. So let's jump to original score now. I still think Oppenheimer is winning. I think Past Lives and Poor Things have been boosted up a little bit. But yeah, there's not. This is what I was saying earlier. There's actually not a ton of new information that I can tell you this year. So I think this month, I'm very tired. I just finished. I'm in community theater, and I just finished the hardest show I've ever done. So I'm tired. I'm a little lightheaded, but I'm trying to get this to you as fast as I can. Best visual effects. Oh boy. So when I first read the news that Dune Part II was being delayed, the first conscious thought I had, at least one of the first, was what on earth is happening in Best Visual Effects now? Who is going to win? Because I had commented before that this race was feeling kind of empty, kind of barren, and now, like, if the Academy came forward and said, hey, we're just not gonna give an Oscar for visual effects this year, I could understand that. Okay, Guardians 3 and Poor Things, I think those two should still be safe. And okay, Guardians 3 is sort of what I'm going for right now. It's the only one that I think is definitely getting the nomination. But I don't know. Then we get into an interesting situation because Marvel's never won before. And with everything we're hearing about the VFX artists at Marvel, and they're striking now too. So would it be a good thing? Would it be congratulating the VFX artists who worked so hard? Or would it be congratulating the system that enforced these cruel work demands? I don't know. There's not really a correct answer to that. And I think it's going to be tricky. But if the competition is so minimal, Poor Things, I think, is a more likely Best Picture contender. But are the effects really going to be that extravagant? And Across the Spider-Verse, in any other year, I'd say was not getting on, but in this year, it is getting on because there's just no competition. It's actually kind of starting to feel like, again, like 2020, like the COVID year, because so many things are getting delayed and the competition is so weak for visual effects. And they are gonna maybe have to get a little bit creative in the types of movies they want to reward. And I think Dungeons and Dragons feels a lot like Love and Monsters. It's that sort of out there pick, but I think there's just enough support that it can happen. And Gran Turismo, I fully acknowledge, is probably not happening, but there are those moments in the trailer where the video game and the real life racetrack come together that seem interesting enough that I think this can happen. Because I already know, I'll tell you what's not happening: Oppenheimer. And a lot of people are very confident that Oppenheimer is happening. And I don't think it's happening at all because there's actually hardly any visual effects in that movie. Like, there's almost no CGI. Nolan tried to do it all practical. Even the big explosion was basically just a small explosion that was made to look big through forced perspective. There's like less than 200 VFX shots, which is like really small for a film of this magnitude. And for anyone who's like, oh, but it's such a big awards contender, it's getting nominated everywhere else, so it should get a visual effects nomination too. Well, that's what we thought about Everything Everywhere last year. But just because a movie is loved overall, if the VFX Guild is still like, there's nothing that impressive here, then they're not going to nominate it. The creator, though, that's right on the edge. I was about to have it in the top 5. I imagine a lot of people have it in the top 5, but there is a controversy over that movie using stock footage of the Beirut explosion in the trailer, which, yeah, is not a good thing to do, and they're rightfully facing the criticism. I think they could still get nominated if that shot is not in the finished film, but if it is, then yeah, I think the controversy is going to be too much for that. And then everything else, I don't even know. This category is just so barren. Makeup and hairstyling. Okay, so I'm going to talk more about Maestro in a little bit because I think that movie is going to do better than expected based on the trailer. But I know that they're kind of coming under fire for what they did with Bradley Cooper's nose in the film, but I really don't think it was done with any ill intent, and the fact that the family is very supportive of it and they gave the go-ahead. I mean, the makeup in The Whale was a little bit controversial too, but that still won. So I think Maestro is going to go all the way. And then I've added Golda, which also, like Maestro, might be a little bit controversial because we're having a non-Jewish character play Jewish through prosthetics. But the makeup is very, very prominent in the film, and looking at it, it does make sense that this would be the sort of thing that would get the lone makeup nomination. Guardians 3, I wasn't going to go for it, but I think I'm starting to think now that if it's winning visual effects, having this one other nomination could really help. And not a whole lot to say with the rest of the categories. It'd be interesting if Oppenheimer makes it on, because there's that one bit at the end where we see older versions of the characters, but I don't know if it's really enough. But I kind of feel like there's a limit to how many nominations this can get. For costume design, anything interesting to say with that one? Not particularly. I've moved Priscilla up to that last slot, and wow, again, most of this is stuff that I've said before. It's so outside of the fact that Dune Part II is no longer here, there's not as much to say. Anything to say in production design? El Conde. El Conde, I think, could be an interesting nominee. I have that at number 8. Instead of a black and white minimalist tragedy of Macbeth style, that could contend. But the fact that it's not contending for international might hurt it. But I don't think it's going to hurt it for Best Cinematography, which I do have it getting nominated in. And I also have Maestro there because the trailer was very striking. I feel like they always try to go for at least one black and white film in between Maestro and El Conde. There's some black and white to go around. So yeah, anything else? I don't actually think. Okay, well, just moving on. Rather than just waste time talking about how there's much to say, I'll just make this a really quick video. So best film editing, I have added Maestro here because I've started to think that movie is going to be a top contender based on the trailer and based on the fact that Netflix usually has one top contender in the race. Yeah, I still think Oppenheimer is definitely winning this. And then everything else, I don't really know. Best adapted screenplay, I have moved Poor Things in, where Dune was previously. Foe, this is my first chance to mention Foe, a movie that I had on my radar initially, and then we thought it wasn't coming out, and then the trailer came out, so now we know it's going to be a thing. I'm hopeful for this movie, but I don't actually have it nominated for anything. I think it could potentially do very, very well. And so I'm just keeping my eye out for that in case some other contenders fall. But then again, just because we have a trailer for something doesn't actually mean it's coming out. That's the tricky thing. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot to say. Oh, I will say I've moved Barbie to number 2. I think there is a world where Barbie wins screenplay solely for the America Ferrera monologue, but I'm just a little bit hesitant to predict it at the moment. Original screenplay, finally, this is starting to look like an actually substantive category. That's probably substantial. Oh, I'm tired. Okay, Past Lives is still winning, but Maestro and Anatomy of a Fall, I'm starting to think that those movies are going to be big contenders. And Holdovers and Air, I think, make a certain amount of sense for the last 2 slots. Still a little bit hesitant on Saltburn, but I have it at number 6. And May December, I'm still not 100% sure what to make about that. I think it might be a little bit too comedic for the Academy's for their standards. For Best Supporting Actor, okay, so I had Ryan Gosling in the number 1 slot, but I replaced him with Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, I do think this one's tricky because I think Gosling, while the movie is really well liked and while Gosling is such a big part of that, there are some critics of the film saying Gosling does hijack the film a little bit too much, and to the point where I think the Golden Globes are going to nominate him for lead, and I'm not entirely sure how the precursors are going to shake out. I'm going to put Downey ahead just for now, but I think Gosling could still be it. And then I haven't seen De Niro, obviously. John McEnroe, there's a part of me that wonders if he might be a little bit more in the conversation to win than we think, just because that character is so vital to the success of the film. And I have Domingo in there, as I'll get to. I don't have Domingo in for lead actor, but I think he's going to get nominated for 1 Oscar this year, and it would make sense to be for this. In the category of Best Supporting Actress, again, very little to say. I have moved Emily Blunt up to 3rd place, even though I'm still not 100% sure about how well that's going to do, but the movie is clearly taking off, and she's someone who's never been nominated before, so it does make a certain degree of sense. Now, I've moved to Raji B. Henson. I almost took her off, but the thing is, I'm not actually sure what to make of this category overall. Jodie Foster, I almost had her in. The thing is, I don't know if I can have Foster in if I don't have Benning in. More on that in a moment. And Ferrera, I really think that can happen. I don't think that's just a pipe dream, but we really do have to wait and see how well the film does overall. And there's not much else to say about that, so for Best Actor... Okay, so after seeing the trailer for Maestro, I am starting to think, I've had Cooper at number 1 for a while now, but I sort of had Cooper at number 1 as a placeholder. I wasn't really sure if I believed it, but now having seen the trailer, yeah, okay, I think it can happen, but I'm not 100% sold, because the movie, as I'll get to in a minute, seems to be slightly more focused on Carey Mulligan than on Bradley Cooper. And the fact that he is directing the movie, that's a big thing. Part of the reason he lost for Star is Born is because he directed himself. Also, Denzel Washington lost directing himself in Fences. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the last time an actor won for directing themselves in a movie was Laurence Olivier for Hamlet, which was a very long time ago. Now, whether or not Cooper can overcome this, I, I'm holding out hope that he can, but it's definitely going to be tricky because in acceptance speeches, actors always thank their director, and Cooper directed himself. Although to be fair, it wasn't his idea to direct this movie. Spielberg is the one who said, "Cooper, you need to direct this." So that narrative certainly does help. I will say it is a little surprising that more people are now predicting TRU to be nominated for Past Lives. And I get it. It is a very small, very quiet performance without a lot of big acting moments, but I feel like they're going to go for the movie in a big way, and if they're going to nominate Greta Lee and they're going to nominate John Magaro, it makes sense to include TRU because I think the three of them really are a package deal. And I have Coleman Domingo just missing, although I could so easily see him getting on. As I said in previous videos, I think it makes more sense if you're going to nominate him for one performance that it would be for Color Purple, but he could always pull a Jamie Foxx and be nominated in both categories, so we'll wait and see. Now, in the category of Best Actress, ooh, this is tight. This is very, very tight. So, I'm going to start off by saying I was wrong in the case of Carey Mulligan. I had her in supporting for a long time, and I was confused by the amounts of people that had her in lead because I assumed this would be a very typical Bernstein biopic and that Mulligan was going to be playing the supportive wife. I was taken aback by the trailer, which not only prominently features the two of them together, but the poster of the movie is her, and she receives top billing over Bradley Cooper. That was a big surprise. The trailer really is making this look like a very romantic story, which is interesting because the one thing that I know about Leonard Bernstein is that he was closeted. So the fact that the movie's going to be centered around their romance, and chances are she's going to be the viewpoint character judging him, it's an interesting idea. But Mulligan has been nominated twice before, a very well-respected actress, has not won an Oscar, so maybe this narrative could get Mulligan to win. Now, here's the tricky thing. Annette Bening in Nyad, I feel like she's either number 1 or number 6, and I was so close to predicting her, because yes, she's also someone who's very overdue, and I want this movie to succeed, but I think there's just enough of a question mark surrounding Nyad, whereas the top 5 I all feel pretty securely about. Fantasia Barrino, I had in the number 1 spot for some time now, but the fact that she is kind of an unknown actress, and I don't really know how well the movie will be received overall, does hurt her chances. Sandra Huller, I know a lot of people are jumping on this bandwagon. Everyone who has seen the movie says she's amazing, and I agree. I haven't seen it, but I'm going to assume that you're right. The problem is the Academy very rarely rewards foreign language performances. They rarely nominate foreign language performances unless it's an actress who is well established in the US, which Sandra Huller is not. I'm going to take your word for it that the performance really is that good, but I think it's going to be an uphill battle to get her to win over this competition. Not to say it's impossible, though. I think Greta Lee and Margot Robbie are going to get on the strength of their movies, and unfortunately that does leave Bening off, and also Emma Stone, who I think is very much in the conversation as well, and Saoirse Ronan, who is also overdue, and I feel like could contend if Bo is a big deal. But, yeah, I just don't know. Portman and Lang, we'll see. We'll see. I did unfortunately take out Halle Bailey, but I hope people remember that performance and nominate her for a Golden Globe at least. Best Director. So this category was giving me so many headaches because it was between the top 6, the 5 that I have now, and Villeneuve, and I was so convinced that Villeneuve, there was no possible way he was missing, and I was torn between Gerwig, Glazer, who's the one that I leave out, and I was even seriously considering predicting a shocking snub for either Scorsese or Nolan. So when the news came out that Dune had gotten delayed, obviously I was very torn up about Best Visual Effects race, but For Best Director, I can breathe a sigh of relief. Phew. Okay, it's just the top 5 now. I don't have to worry about having a super, super tight top 6. Now, while I am predicting the top 5, and most other people do have these same 5 directors, I do want to point out, we're all just assuming that Zone of Interest is going to hit with the Academy more, but I have heard some stuff that the movie, while it played very well to a Cannes Film Festival audience, it might be a little bit less accessible for a general audience, and some people might gravitate more towards Anatomy of a Fall. And so I do think it's possible that Anatomy of a Fall hits with the Academy a little bit harder, and that movie gets the international director slot. And if that happens, then we have a Best Director category that features 3 women and 2 men, which would be pretty extraordinary to see. I'm not gonna be bold enough to predict it, but I want everyone to know that that is a possible outcome. And just to close everything out with Best Picture, not much has changed other than the fact that I've become very, very confident about Maestro. I think that movie has the potential to go very far. I think Netflix has to have a big contender in the race every year, and I think this is going to be it. The trailer really did a lot to sell me. I know I technically had it at number 10 before, but I didn't have a lot of faith in it. And now I do. I think that this movie is going to be one of the top contenders, and potentially could get Bradley Cooper and potentially Carey Mulligan Oscars. Now, the other thing that I think is maybe the bigger update is I now have both The Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall in Best Picture. I've been saying for a while now, I think we're getting closer and closer to the day where 2 non-English language movies are nominated in Best Picture. I think we saw in 2021, Drive My Car got the Best Picture nomination, but Worst Person in the World and Flea were very beloved. And last year, All Quiet got the nomination, but RRR was super beloved too. And I think these international features are getting more and more eyes on them, and there's a bigger international voting branch in the Academy, and I think that day is coming sooner rather than later, and maybe it's going to happen this year. Because I hear that both of these movies are absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to watch them. And it would be nice if the Best International Feature category could actually be a little bit competitive. Because that category has not been competitive in a very long time. We always know what's going to win. Just go with the Best Picture nominee. But it would be really interesting to see those 2 movies both nominated in Best Picture, and then duking it out for international feature. Outside of that, I will say Spider-Verse, I'm actually surprised in how torn a lot of people seem to be. Some people say Spider-Verse is definitely getting the Best Picture nomination. Some people even say it's top 5. Others say it's not coming close to a Best Picture nomination, and that all of the hype for that has died down since Barbenheimer. And as of right now, I don't know. I did get my hopes up. I admit. I think when it won the Hollywood Critics Association Mid-Season Awards over Past Lives, that really got me thinking, okay, this can happen. It has the support and the passion to make this happen. And if anything, the fact that Beyond the Spider-Verse is probably going to get delayed, from what I've heard, that just insensitizes voters even more. Okay, we can't just wait next year for the final movie, which was the big thing I was worried about. I mean, I've been lied to, and I've gotten my hopes up so many times in the past for animated movies and Best Picture, but I really want to have faith in this one, and I am seeing the possibilities for it to get nominated in other categories. So I think this can happen. But it's right on number 10. And I am very curious about Foe. I think that could be a big hit or it could be a big miss. I'm not entirely sure which way it could go based on the trailer. So there it is. I'm sorry that this prediction video had to be done at the very end of the month. I'll try to make the September prediction earlier in the month. The fact that we are right on the precipice of Venice Film Festival happening means we're going to start to get reviews of movies like Poor Things and Holdovers and Saltburn. So that's a very, very big deal. And once we have some early actions on that, I should try to get my next prediction video to you relatively quickly. And let's cross our fingers and hope nothing else big gets delayed. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.